if we can get a kind of meta purpose, something that's bigger than me, that I can start aiming towards, I can turn the best problem solving machine in the world and face it there. And I become then a conduit, I become a resource, and my life becomes instantly better. I stop focusing on me, I start focusing on others. I start looking at contribution, I start connecting with others in a way, I start being willing to ask for help because I can't solve that problem in a big way. That is so much better than being in your room with your pile of personal development books and your YouTube clips going, what the fuck is wrong with me? One, you'll never find the answer to that question. Two, if you do, you ain't gonna like it. Purpose and meaning are fundamental, absolutely fundamental to the men's personal development journey. It's almost the centerpiece, really. But I think it may not be for the reasons that people always think. There's been a million books written on, finding your mission, finding your purpose, your soul contract, whatever it is you want to call it. There's been a million books written on that, and with good reason, because it makes the difference between a life well lived. If I can connect to my purpose, if I can connect to my mission, it helps me align everything else in my life. It becomes a bit of a North Star that I can move towards. And what it also does is it generates a don't do list. If I'm going that way, I ain't going that way. And so we make better decisions, the real meaning of decision, which is cutting off all other possibilities, because I know where I'm going. I know what I want to do. It makes it easier for me to make decisions. The problem is twofold. The problem is, one, how do you find mission? How do you find your purpose? And having found it, how do we align our life towards it? So we can take that it's important, but how do we find it? What do we do with it? And that's where I think a lot of people start making some mistakes. Whenever I tend to talk to men often, and I'm talking about what's your purpose, what's your mission, where are you going, it instantly becomes about goals, right? It becomes about, oh, I don't know, I could be a great novelist, or I could be this, or should I be a businessman, or should I be this? We get involved in all these binary different things. And that's why I think the first stage is to get a kind of meta purpose, for want of a better word, like something that goes all of that. And that doesn't include any of the hows. That isn't about, I'm going to be the greatest snowboarder of all time, right? Because I love snowboarding. Nothing to do with that. It's what is the sort of man I'm moving towards in terms of values, in terms of what I want to give the world, in terms of how I would like people to talk about me after my death. I think that's one of the best ways. One of the best ways to find that meta is, how would you like to be described as a man once you were dead, right? And then it gets more interesting. You start getting men talk about things like, I'd like to be considered fair and adventurous, and that I left things in a better shape than I found them. Great. Now we're getting towards a meta purpose. What sort of man are you? I'm fair, I'm adventurous, and I leave things better than I found them. Right, great. Let's put that at the top. That's something good to move towards. It tells you when you're not being fair. It tells you when you're not being adventurous, and it tells you when you're fucking shit up rather than improving shit. So we get a don't do list. That's good enough. We can get to that before we have to start getting complicated with, well, what am I good at? What does the world want? That's a different question. That's a layer down. So we need to set a meta purpose, first of all. And that's usually around, what's the sort of man I want to be? It's also really useful to have up there, what do I serve? And people who watch my stuff will know that service is, I think service and this thing of purpose, the two of those are intertwined. And if we can get those two things right, we're basing a really solid through road through the rest of our life that's going to make it fulfilling. Because we can always find somewhere or something to serve. Just open the paper and look at a problem and go, I want to play a part in solving that problem. So not only are you going to be fair, adventurous, you leave things in a better way than you found them, but you want to make sure that no one's ever hungry, right? Suddenly you've got something there that is important beyond you. And so let me just stop for a moment and talk about why it's important that it's something bigger than you. People may have heard me talk about the archetypes, the lover, warrior, the magician, the king. And people have various different ways of describing those archetypes. When I talk about the king archetype, which in many ways is the sort of mature version of how we are when we're at our best, our character lives in there, the best version of us. When I introduce it, I always say that it is the archetype that is capable of holding a vision to something bigger and more important than self. So therefore it can hold decisions. So decisions are made in that part. Decisions are made from my decisions. If I'm in my best state, are made from my king. They're made from the best version of me. If I'm making it from my warrior, it's all going to be about action and boundaries. If I'm making it from my lover, it's all going to be about connection based. If I'm doing it from my magician, it's all going to be manipulative planning. If I'm doing it from my king, I'm normally making better decisions because I'm making decisions based on a vision to something bigger and more important than self. Now that sounds very grandiose, right? And it is, but it works on a meta level too. We evolved, right? I'll come to this as well there. We were kind of a bit of a shit monkey, right? We didn't have the biggest claws. We couldn't outrun anything in terms of speed, although they're saying actually one of our strengths may have been that we could run for a long time. But we couldn't outrun most things, most other predators. We weren't stronger than most other predators. We weren't as ruthless as most predators. So we, as a primate, had to learn to live on the extremities. We lived in the trees for a long time. And when we came down from the trees, we had to learn to live on the extremities of whatever environment we were in. And I mean, look at it. Deserts, we learned to thrive there. On ice, we learned to thrive there. And the reason we learned to live in those is because to survive, our tool was this thing called our brain. We developed, it evolved that we had the biggest and best problem solving machine still in the world until we create one that's better than us. We have the biggest problem solving machine in the world between our ears. And it is created to live on the very extremities. Now, the problem most of us are facing now is we ain't living on the extremities. We don't have a massive problem like, how do I survive on this piece of ice where we've ended up because we're running from those polar bears? How do we eat here, right? We don't have that problem now. So what do? We try to solve the problem of us. What should I be doing now? What does this life mean? Just think about it. If you've got a machine that is designed to solve problems, it therefore looks at everything as a problem. You turn that inwards and go, what's wrong with me? You're fucked. You ain't gonna, that's a race to the bottom. And that's what depression is. When you talk to people depressed, you find it's often based in reality. What is the point? Well, I don't fucking know, there must be some. When you've got a problem like, we're going to starve to death, if we don't find to eat something here before that polar bear comes and rips our arms off, you ain't worried about depression because you've got a big enough problem. So on a meta level, when we can find connection to service to something bigger than us, we take ourselves out of the equation. We no longer become the center of the universe. We start to think that maybe solving this problem, maybe helping this person, maybe doing that is actually more important than me. So we turn that problem-solving machine that's staring in at us, and we turn it outside, and we go, that's the problem we're going to solve. Suddenly our life instantly becomes better. When we stop taking ourselves so seriously and stop seeing ourselves as the center of the universe, right? As the only problem that needs solved is, what am I all about? And suddenly it's about, hang on, I'd rather solve that problem over there. All of those resources get faced somewhere else. And that's not distraction. That's not just being distracted from the problem of me. I was never the problem. I'm just an animal that's stumbling around on this piece of rock, trying to work out the best way to survive. And I'm not having to survive. And so that's why if we can get a kind of meta purpose, something that's bigger than me, that I can start aiming towards, I can turn the best problem solving machine in the world and face it there. And I become then a conduit, I become a resource, and my life becomes instantly better. I stop focusing on me, I start focusing on others. I start looking at contribution. I start connecting with others in a way. I start being willing to ask for help because I can't solve that problem in a big way. That is so much better than being in your room with your pile of personal development books and your YouTube clips going, what the fuck is wrong with me? One, you'll never find the answer to that question. And if you're if you do, you ain't going to like it, right? So get doing something else because you're not a problem to be solved, but your brain thinks you are. So the next time you're feeling down on yourself and be like, why am I sitting here watching fucking Pornhub and eating custard creams and not out there? Because you're a shit monkey without a big enough problem. The shit monkey wants to just go, let's get as much sugar as we can because there's a food source here and we're getting dopamine hits and there ain't a saber-toothed tiger trying to eat us. So it's going to stay in there, in your room. You're going to stay in that room watching Pornhub and eating custard creams. Because if you were based on survival, if there was a war going on out there, it'd be a pretty good place to be. But in terms of thriving in the 21st century, I don't think that's the man you want to be. So a meta purpose of how I want to serve and what is the sort of man I want to be gets you out of your bedroom. It gets you onto the street, it gets you talking to people, and it gets your self-worth being built up. It gets you having that level of certainty. It gets your competence up. It gets you aligned. It gets you talking to other people. It gets you to the man who wants to thrive and not the man who wants to hide and survive, which is what your brain will trick you into if it can.
I'm focused. I've been watching for the omens. I've been listening to everything you said. It's been running through my head, locked and loaded. I got the feeling that you know it. Yeah, I've only just begun. I won't stop until it's done, till you broke.